Hey, welcome in. I'm Rita, and this is the story I'm telling myself. If you've ever felt like you're standing in your own way, you are not alone. Let's get into it.
Welcome, friends, to the story I am telling myself. This is the second episode of season 2, and I am so excited to introduce you to our guest today, Holly McNeill. Holly, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Hey, Rita, I'm excited. I made it. Technology, we got it. We're here. Let's do this.
Yes. We always with the technology, right? If you are joining us for this live, we want to know you're here. Please come into the comments, welcome our guest, Holly, introduce yourselves, and make sure that you're chatting with us along the way because we love when you participate. Holly, I want you to tell everybody who you are as they are welcoming you to the episode.
So I am Holly McNeill. I'm the mindfulness architect, and you're going to hear a lot more about how I got to be. I am actually an architect, and you're going to hear a lot more about how I got to be an architect shortly. But I teach people about how their mind works. I've created a set of practices called Per Love that take you from the small and isolated to as far as you want to go, involving neuroscience, psychology, quantum physics, all the way to contemplative practices, meditation, emptiness, Buddhism. And it was a great journey. It's a great journey to be on. So thank you for having me.
I love that. HollyMcNeill.com. She keeps it really simple, folks. If you want to find her, and you're going to want to find her and dip into these resources and practices with Holly, HollyMcNeill.com is where you're going to find her. Welcome, Gary. So glad to have you joining us.
Gary. I've seen you before.
Yeah, welcome, Angela. Great to have you. I'm glad it's a sunny morning in Seattle. It is here too. I posted some pictures this morning of our beautiful cotton candy sunrise for my walk today. So we're going to get right into it, Holly, because that's what people are here for. And you are going to share a story that is about something that we talk a lot about right now on social media, which is this conflict of when our insides and our outsides are not aligned. And you're choosing to share a very personal story about that. So please walk us into the story, take us into a moment, and start to tell us about this disconnect that you were experiencing.
Huge disconnect. Thanks, Rita. So last May, I had the opportunity to speak on the campus at Yale, and the start of my talk went something like this. My father was a home builder in the Black Hills of South Dakota. He was my hero. He saved me from drowning. He was everything to me. And my earliest childhood memories was of, picking up discarded nails for 1 penny a piece and making concrete animals from the concrete mixer. And years later in high school, he asked me what I wanted to be. And I thought, wow, I loved art and math, but I wasn't super great at both of them. And I loved my father, the home builder. And I looked at him and I said, I want to be an architect. And I never looked back. By age 27, I was managing the largest historic preservation project in the state, my home state of South Dakota, but still at, 10 to 15 guys around me at a construction site, all listening to what I had to say, exuding authority well beyond my years. I went on to do K-12, academic buildings, and then hospitals for 10 years, large, complex hospitals nationally. I worked in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, in line to be the managing principal of one of the largest architecture firms in the United States. So you have to ask, why? Why was I standing at that women's mental health conference at Yale? Why am I here today, right? Well, it's because of that disconnect. Yeah, that crash. That now they know 75 to 80% of us will hit in our late 20s, in early 30s, feelings of anxiety and disconnection, deep uncertainty about identity, career choice, and purpose.
And so I'm just going to interrupt you here. So what you were describing is sort of, you were this boss woman.
I was it.
Like you were at the top of your game. You were doing amazing things.
Yes, I was.
And what is the and yet, Holly?
And yet, so I crashed. I had, like a lot of people do, we make stories we tell ourselves when we're young from trauma or whatever we deal with when we're growing up. And then to make ourselves okay, we live from those lenses, but we try to cover it up, right? So I did that really well. I had everything, not just the career, handsome husband, 2 beautiful boys. I built a lovely house, right down to, all right, my pets, right? Alfredo and fettuccine, everything you're supposed to want, everything anyone's supposed to want to be happy. But on the inside, I was empty.
Did you know you were empty yet? Or
No,
was it so subconscious, this cover up that was going on?
Completely unaware of what I was doing. I woke up every day anxious and feeling unworthy, but I thought that was normal because that's how I woke up and felt every single day. But
I'm just going to throw that to the listeners right now. If you're a listener and you can relate, let's not leave Holly hanging.
Gosh. Yeah.
If you've had that period, maybe now, it may be a former time in your life where you woke up every day anxious, but you didn't know why. When you felt this anxiety, maybe you go to the doctor and they say, your blood pressure is really high or whatever. And you're like, I don't know what's going on with me. Maybe you can relate to Holly.
A lot of this quarter life crisis can be misdiagnosed as anxiety and depression because it's really just make us realizing the question. Here's the question you get to: how the hell did I get here? And this was a time around the turn of the century. I'm going to date myself here. The Twin Towers. This was a bad time for the whole country, the whole world. The Twin Towers had just fallen, and HIV was still a thing. People were dying of AIDS. And I got sick. And in those days, you had to wait 2 weeks for the test results. Yes, thank you for understanding, Angela. You had to wait for the test results 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, it was rock bottom for me. My anxiety was flaring. I had 2 small kids. What if I was positive, right? What would they think when I'm gone? But to figure out how I got there, we have to go back. Okay. Yes, earlier time in your life. Yep. We have to go back to those stories we tell ourselves. So when I was 7, this happens to a lot of people, right? I walked into the laundry room. I saw my mother crying. And I asked her what was wrong. And she said, without a moment's hesitation, she said, your father wants a divorce. He doesn't love us anymore. And you have to remember, my world shattered. I mean, divorce, right? Everyone out there, divorce, 50% of us go through it, but it doesn't make it any easier, right?
Well, and you had such a strong relationship with your dad, and your mother just put a label.
Oh my gosh.
It wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough. I mean, how devastating for little Holly.
This person, he was my hero. He meant everything to me. All of a sudden, I'm not worthy of his love. I'm flawed. I did something wrong. And she used us as shields. She did. There were 6 of us. She basically alienated him from us. But in my head, it was me. When you're little, you don't have that prefrontal cortex enough to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? There's no awareness there, right? So
that was the start of this deep seed of doubt about your worthiness.
Oh yeah,
your ability to be loved.
Unworthy, unlovable, flawed. I loved him. He was everything to me, and he didn't love me anymore. To make matters worse,
and I just want to pause and say before we go forward here to our listeners, it is important to understand exactly what Holly is just saying. These things form into our subconscious at a young age when we really lack the capacity to understand and process. And so this is not about attacking yourself. It is not about naming your dysfunction in some way. It is just about recognizing how, as life unfolds, it leaves an imprint. And the more aware we are of that imprint, the more ability we have to shape those hidden stories that run like tapes behind the scenes.
But most of us are on autopilot, because the only thing really functioning then is our amygdala, which is always on, always looking for danger, always trying to protect you. And to make matters worse, a couple years later, my mother remarried, and I was so happy because this new man was going to make me whole again. He was going to love me. He's going to be my new father, right? And I was 10 or 11, and sometimes at night I would crawl in bed next to them just to feel safe. And one such night, after my mom had fallen asleep, he pulled me close, and that night I became more confused about fathers and love and touch. I learned that touch was love. And the next day, learning that touch was love, he was sitting in the kitchen, and I pulled up my shirt to show him my budding breast, and he poked it, and I was so embarrassed. And to make matters worse, my sister was sitting in the dining room, and she looked over and she goes, "Holly, what are you doing? That's disgusting." And so in a matter of 24 hours, I learned that love was touch was love, and that I was not only unlovable, unworthy, and broken, I was also disgusting and shameful.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
I was gone. I'm a goner, without any kind of awareness, without any kind of parent there to help you, you're gone, you're toast. And so those are the stories I built my life on. Those are the stories I created this perfect world around. And this is going to go one of two ways, right? So touch is love. So either as I grow up, I'm going to try to get as much touch as I can. And I imagine there's people out there that did that as a child, as a teenage girl or boy or whatever. It's very confusing. But I didn't go that way. I was also disgusting and shameful. So I became the ugly, when what I saw was the ugly girl in the mirror, right? I couldn't go to birthday parties. I never went to a junior high school dance, never asked to prom. Yeah, always, seeing that ugly unworthiness. Art was really my only kind of sanctuary during high school. And so we tend to attract people like vibrations. And I got married at the perfect age, 23 and 25. We were the perfect height, very handsome. I created the perfect everything, like I said, everything you could ever want. And it wasn't enough because I was so anxious. But life this stuff oozes out, right, Rita? You can't stuff away parts of yourself without having it ooze out. So in my early 30s, my husband and I was worked at construction sites. We'd always joke about the guys there. And one way or the other, he said, well, why don't you, get a little more experience sexually? And at first I was like surprised, but I wasn't even upset by it. I didn't have enough awareness to say what was going on. I was excited, right? Someone else to love me, someone else to touch me. Yeah. And so I did. And I didn't even have the self-worth to protect myself. I was on the pill. I wasn't going to get pregnant, but I did get sick. And I didn't know if my choices were going to kill me. I was sick for a long time, and it dawned on me, you might have HIV, and there was no cure back then. And so waiting those 2 weeks after living this life of being anxious and unlovable, thinking about I woke up crying on the toilet in the middle of the night and asked, thinking about what are my kids going to ask if mom's gone? What happened to her? And I made a vow that night that if this comes back negative, give me, life, God, Buddha, the universe, anyone out there listening, if this comes back negative, I will change. Give me another chance and I'll do better. And you had to go in to the clinic to get the results back then. And they brought you into a little consult room, and the nurse walked in with an envelope, holding my life in it. She opened it up and it was negative. And here I am today. With my karmic debt in tow, I went out to make good on that vow. And, the universe listens to you if you put that message out there. If you put that message out there, I had no idea what was better. I had no idea what I was looking for. All I knew was the stories I told myself. I had no idea what was better, but I believed there had to be better than that. It was so awful. And getting that second chance, why do we have to hit so hard? Why do we have to hit so low before you start to look? I mean, granted, I think with my experience as a child that I was pretty well gone. So I guess maybe it took that much to wake me up. But in making that vow and keeping it, I tripped upon this amazing journey that is available for every single one of us. And
I'm going to pause you there before we get into that journey, and we're going to step into that in just a moment. But I just want to step into where we are in the story right now, and help people recognize something very important here. The question of this episode is: are you headed for an inevitable crash?
Yeah.
And you feel very strongly, and you teach in your work, that the answer to that question is yes, when you are outsourcing your validation, your worthiness, all of those things.
If you're on autopilot, it's running, you're running from whatever's in your subconscious powerhouse, whatever habits and stories you told yourself, you tell yourself, right? Everyone, most people without awareness, that's right.
And so at this moment in time in the story, did you yet recognize that this was about worthiness, about any of these things? Or you just knew that you needed to ask better questions and bigger questions and create a different relationship with yourself?
It wasn't even asking better questions. It really wasn't. It was more about believing, the power of intention and belief. And then I had no idea. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what was better. All I knew, my normal, was anxiety and unworthiness. But then things started to show up. I was at work across the state, and I walked into a bookstore, and there on the new arrivals table was Stand Up for Your Life by Cheryl Richardson. And in it, you open the book, and in the introduction, it says, be careful what you wish for, because, the universe will respond and it will rock your world. The right people, events, and situations will help you along your way. But even so, mentally, physically, and spiritually, we're all connected. So I started doing yoga, meditation, books started showing up. But even then, we still were in this kind of swinging mode. And there's another person, a Native American man that I was with for a tiny bit. This is really crazy. And we went to lunch one day, and he goes, "Why are you so unhappy?" And I'm like, "I'm not unhappy." He goes, "Why are you so unfulfilled?" I said, "I'm not unfulfilled." And we got to know each other, and I had enough journey. I had opened up enough to recognize that I had taken all the power that I had given to my husband, and I gave it to this man. And all of a sudden, I felt nothing for my husband, which, okay, something's not right there. And I said to him, "I've given you all my power." And he said, "I know. And so I have to leave." And he left with all my power. And back then we didn't have smartphones, but we did have email on the computer at work. And I just kept going back to my computer, hoping, begging that he would come back to me. And sitting there in that pain, that's when I was like, all right, this can't be right. Someone else can't own my power. And in that afternoon, it was like the lights came on. I couldn't see a lot, but I could see the mutually manipulative and controlling marriage I was in. I could see how I had given away everything that I had given him my power, and it was so painful. So I went back home, and I very not graciously or compassionately left the marriage, jumped into an 8-year battle for my children and trying to prevent my own alienation from them, while at the same time trying to find my way. But
I'm sorry, I'm going to pause you again before you move past this, because I think this idea of giving away your power. Like you were able to name that.
Yes.
I don't want you to be more vulnerable than you want to be, but can you share for listeners who might be asking themselves the question, ooh, is that me? Am I in a relationship like that? Am I giving away my power to am I outsourcing my power to somebody else, giving them control of that? What were some indicators? What were some of the things that really helped you recognize and name that for yourself?
Well, people jump into new relationships, right? And that's what I was doing. But he was very spiritual. Maybe it was his energy. I mean, he also had his own stuff, right? But when I told him and he put that wall up and it hurt that hard, then you can't be in a relationship if you can't be whole in it. So if someone's out there, and if you think of that person that you love, that you need, if that person were to die or to be gone, right? What would you have here? Of course, if you love someone and they pass away, it's different. But if you're in a bad relationship and that person's gone, what would you have here? It was because I started meditating. It was because I started to ask for more. I wanted to know. If you want to know, the world will show you. The universe will show you. But you have to want to know, because it will rock your world. And that's exactly what it did for me. It rocked my world. It was those 8 years were so hard. I had to fight. I know what alienation did to children, right? I was alienated from my father, and now I'm the parent, and my ex-husband's trying to alienate me from my children. And through every move, through every police episode, through every time the kids destroyed the apartment, I stuck in it for 8 years. And every time they would leave, I'd be strong in front of the police or in all the court cases and all the custody battles. And every time they leave, I'd fall to pieces on the floor. But every time I picked myself up, I would see myself a little bit differently. And about 10 years in, I realized that I had something to say. Right? I was out there. I had something to say. So I put 2 intentions out to the world in my early 40s. The first was to retire from architecture before I turned 50. And the second was to have the time and space to write about what I was learning. And as life had it, I retired 2 days before I turned 50. And in 2017, I sat down to write. I wrote for 6 years, but the journey continues, right? If you're looking, if I had a question, the next thing was the answer. I got enough courage to move from South Dakota to Minneapolis to grow my career, to grow my spiritual journey. And then 8 years into it, my son came to me and said, "Mom, I'm going on vacation with Dad and I'm not coming back." My older son had already left. He was old enough to go live with his dad. And I was going to let my younger son go earlier on, or at the next fall. I said, "That's not how it works." And his teacher called me and said, "Your son is saying goodbye to all his friends, telling his teachers he's not coming back." And I said to him, I tried to talk to him. I tried to email my ex-husband and nothing. And that's exactly what happened. He went on vacation and he didn't come back. But something told me I had done enough, that I had told, they knew that I loved them. So all along, right, I'm still finding my way. I'm still uncovering, what's going on, these layers and layers, right, in our neural net, all these habits and patterns. But the answers were coming. And I spent 1.5 years as a childless mother in Minneapolis, but wanting to do more with my spiritual journey, with my career, I made the choice that if I couldn't live in their day-to-day, influencing their lives day-to-day, that I would live by example. And so I left Minneapolis and my kids. And when I went to say goodbye, my younger son understood, but my older son, we were at a baseball game and he got in the car and he started revving the engine. I said, "Nate," he goes, "Mom, parents don't leave their children." I mean, I had barely seen them. I said, I tried to tell him all that I had done, everything that I was trying to do. And he kept revving the engine. He couldn't hear me. I said, "Mom, parents don't leave their children." It's the hardest thing I ever did. But I did move to the greater New York City area. I practiced Buddhism for 5 years. At age 49, I packed up everything I had, left everyone I know to move across the country to live in a Dharma house in San Francisco. All the while unraveling all of this, it's all about awareness. Awareness is the journey, and your attention is the path to get there. Wherever you're putting your attention, that's what's creating your life. I was putting my attention on wanting that better. And in Buddhism, you name it, right? You want to become enlightened and then liberate all living beings from suffering. So
we've got to repeat this real quick though, because this is a powerful moment that we don't want to lose.
Mm-hmm.
What you just said, Holly, is wherever you put your attention, that is the path. That's the journey you will be on.
That's the journey you're creating. You identify. And when we're kids, we put our attention on trying to be safe. And at first we're wide open. You try to be safe. And so you identify with whatever you put your attention to. You create from whatever you put your attention to. You see life through those experiences. And that's what I was doing until the crash. That's why people crash, because a lot of these stories, we don't ever question them. And they're outdated and they're untrue and they're unhelpful. Yet we live by them. We create by them every day. And this house of cards is inevitably going to fall, right? So that's why one of the biggest things I want to do is advocate to show younger people how your mind works, not just mindfulness, but teach them to learn to question these thoughts, to realize that these thoughts are just thoughts. They're not who you are. You are the awareness creating this world. So, wherever you put your attention, and if it's on autopilot, most people they're actually identifying it now. 75 to 80% of people from 27 to 33, 34 get to the how the hell did I get here point. Mm-hmm.
And that autopilot, there are many different tapes that play, but there are also some universal ones that trap us. For some of us, we get trapped in the perfectionist tape. I can't ever make a mistake. If I have to be perfect enough in order to be accepted. Right. For other people, it's that I've got to earn. I've got to be pleasant enough. I've got to earn acceptance in the group and sacrifice myself at all cost in order to be an insider, whatever it is. But again, so much of that gets formulated at a time and a stage in our lives that we do not have the capacity to examine it. So therefore we're not even aware. That's why it's a subconscious thing.
We're not even aware. It's not even just your thoughts, right? So there's the chaos in your mind, then you close your heart, and then also in your gut. From 11th grade on till actually like 2 weeks ago, my gut was my teacher. It's the one pushing me on. That pain. Sometimes you don't even have to think the thoughts anymore. It's so automated that the body just starts to react. I can wake up in the middle of the night, my body just starts to clench. I don't even think things anymore because those patterns if you're not aware of them, if you're not aware of these stories you're telling yourself, the neural net is going to get stronger and stronger, and it's going to get more and more real to you without putting that attention and awareness to questioning it, looking at it, is it helpful, and letting it go, which is what the practices are all about, which a lot of what I love about this journey is that everything points back to this: neuroscience, psychology, quantum physics, Buddhism, spirituality.
We're coming up on our final 5 minutes, and I want to invite you, if you are joining us live and you are in the comments and you have questions that you want to ask Holly, please drop them in right now. We'll try to respond to comments along the way. I think that it's so critical what you are naming here, Holly, which is something we want to call out for listeners, and that is, you just said, you wake up in the middle of the night. If you're one of those people that you wake up and you have a hard time falling back asleep, you have some version of insomnia in your life, this is the alarm bell your system is sending you, that you've got this autopilot thing going, that you have some deeply subconscious anxiety producing thing that is controlling your life And this is the perfect time to start looking inside, and you have some tools and some ways to help people do that. Do you want to share some tips with people who are maybe experiencing that?
Absolutely. And just know that your mind is meant to protect you. I mean, this whole ugly girl in the mirror was my protection. It was a way of protecting me from going out there and being hurt. And so when you go to change, that's not in your patterns, and you're gonna meet with resistance. This isn't gonna work. This is stupid.
Yeah.
But if there's something you want in your life, you intend it, and then you repeat it over and over and over again. I feel it in your body. I am worthy. I am worthy. That's what affirmations are about, creating new habits and patterns. So it takes time to unravel, as you can imagine, all that you've been believing and growing all of those years, but it's absolutely available to everyone.
Can you give a specific example from your journey of like one of those things that you recognized you wanted to create in your life, and sort of how that how you have moved through the journey of manifesting that?
Well, retiring, the two intentions, retiring before I turned 50. I sat down to write for 7 or 8 years. I printed out a book proposal, and looking over at the pages, I could see the path that I had just taken, that 20-year circuitous route I had just taken. So I want to be out speaking to people, right? But all along the way, here's something interesting. All along the way, I was wondering where my own compassion and ultimately under all of that, we are love, we are self-compassion, kindness. And I learned about, opening the gut. And just like 2 weeks ago, I opened the gut, and, mentally I had gotten out of the chaos of the mind into the open heart, opened the gut, and all of this compassion and kindness and self-love comes rushing out. And I thought I was going to be smothered. It's like it was protecting me until I trusted enough, until I knew enough, until I was aware enough that, it could let go. And it was amazing. It's an amazing journey. Just start with one thing though. Start small. If you don't want to pick up your phone and look at your phone, every time you look at your phone, put it down and say, I love you, over and over and over and over again. Create those new pathways so that when you are on autopilot, your brain doesn't discriminate between good and bad conditioning. Put some good conditioning in there.
Thank you, Gary. Gary said he loves the story of the profound changes in your life and can identify with much of your story.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that is true. It's one of the reasons I was so excited after meeting you, Holly, for your podcast, to have this opportunity to invite you here to share this story, because I think it is highly relatable to all of us that, we are very complex as human beings, folks. We are extremely complex, and we can hold a lot of seemingly conflicting things simultaneously in our lives. Yeah. We can be, as Holly was, this very self-assured, very boss lady, very in control, create this what looks like an incredible life, and at the same time be deeply suffering within ourselves for lack.
Yeah.
And that is something that until somebody named that for me at one point in my life and said, you can have these things coexist simultaneously, until I could really ingest that, I didn't understand. I thought the outside was the truth and the inside was just a lie.
Mm-hmm. The mind is very powerful, but we are more in control of it than we know. And the inside a lot of times can be a lie, right? We have to question those thoughts. If you just start to question something, you believe about yourself, please question it. It's probably not true. It's probably outdated. And every one of us are amazing human spirits on this human journey. And this opening, this awareness is free and available to you every moment.
Well, and so a really simple tip and process I would like to share with our listeners is this. Simply, one, try to name what you're feeling. So start by naming the feeling. And then once you can can give some kind of name to the feeling, then you can ask the next question, which is, what is that feeling about? And that's going to lead you to and so what is the story I'm telling myself about that? Any strong emotional reaction that you have is an opportunity for you to ask yourself the question, what's the story I'm telling myself behind this emotional response? And once this is why the podcast is called this. It's the best self-coaching tool that you have, is to ask yourself, what's my story about this? And then you can say, well, what about that might be true? And what about that might I need to change?
And thank you, Sharon, for your comment. You're absolutely right. There are many ways out of the chaos of the mind. We just have to put our attention to it. So I'm glad that you identified with part of the story, and hopefully you're on your own amazing journey.
Final thoughts, words of wisdom you would like to share with our listeners, Holly, before we wrap up the episode?
Yeah, actually, it was always amazing to me how things show up. If there's something that you want, put it out there and watch for what shows up. I'm still on my journey, and the latest thing for me is trust. Trust yourself, not the thoughts in your head, but trust. When you were born here, you weren't named Rita. I wasn't named Holly. We were this conscious awareness. Trust that, and it will show you the way. Everything in your life is showing you what you need to let go to set yourself free. I
love those final words. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gary. Yes, learning to tell your story is so important.
Yes, that took me a while too.
Friends, thank you so much for joining us today on The Story I'm Telling Myself. Make sure to share this episode. It's going to hit podcast channels on Thursday. You can share it with your friends. I know the power of Holly's words belong in many people's ears. And then come back next week. We have my friend Allison Sherwin, who is an entrepreneur who started a business and then had to make the tough decision to let it go. And we're going to talk about the stories we tell ourselves about our ability to let go of things. And I know you're going to be very inspired by that episode as well. So come back again. Thanks for joining us today. Holly, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita.
Us. Again, hollymcneill.com is how you find her. Please reach out. Again, she speaks. She works with people who want to be on this journey. She has lots of wonderful things she can share with you. hollymcneill.com. See everybody back here again soon. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you love this episode, leave us those 5 stars and be sure to share this with a friend. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. See you back here next week.